Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Farrell, editor of the Florentine. I'm delighted this evening to be speaking with Ragini Gupta, who is the new Consul General of the United States in Florence. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Helen, and to the Florentine for giving me this opportunity to speak to your audience tonight.
It's become a tradition in a way that we always chat with the new consul. I mean, you're not so new. You actually arrived in August, in the middle of the pause of the pandemic waves. And I was wondering what your first impressions were when you arrived in Tuscany.
Well, Tuscany has a very special place in my heart. The first time I came here was about 30 years ago when I was a younger person and had just taken a few art history courses at university. And I was astounded by the beauty of Florence, Pisa, and the Tuscan countryside. Being able to see the masterpieces, masterpiece upon masterpiece at the Uffizi, at the Accademia, and to really just feel the environment, the ambiance of the Renaissance in every street and every corner. It was an experience I never forgot. And to be able to come back here as U.S. Consul General is really incredibly special, a dream come true. Tuscany and Florence is every bit as beautiful, as astounding, and as inspiring today as it was 30 years ago.
It's true. I mean, it's important to focus on this aspect, especially where we are at the moment, that, you know, this inspiration and the beauty surrounds us everywhere we go. I mean, during your career, you've served overseas in various different postings in Jordan, if I'm correct, Mexico, Pakistan, and India. I'm wondering, in what way does a posting like this in Italy differ from your prior experiences?
Well, all of my prior postings were considered hardship assignments for one reason or another. And obviously, the assignment here in Florence is not. And I view it as a gift or a reward for the time that I have served in places under some fairly challenging circumstances. Now, those challenging circumstances actually made the work incredibly interesting and intellectually stimulating. And I have enjoyed every single assignment I've had and been lucky to have been present to see history being made. For example, in Pakistan, I was managing the terrorism finance portfolio during the height of the war against terror. And in Jordan, I was present and witnessed both the rise and the subsequent military defeat of the Islamic State. So these have been incredible opportunities. But I would say that the way in which this assignment here in Italy differs most significantly from my prior assignments is the incredible breadth and depth of the bilateral relationship between the United States and Italy, and the extent of our ties, our economic ties, our cultural ties, our military ties, and the incredible people-to-people connections that we have, and that that a publication like the Florentine supports and encourages. So being here, it's just incredibly evident that our friendship and our alliance is based on shared values and a real mutual respect and admiration.
It's a wonderful word, and I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, this is something that we're seeing more and more, is the unity that's in the community, the international community in Florence, which is not just in Italy. You know, of course, we've got all of our American readers who tune in and keep saying how much they want to come back and everything like this. So it is the ties that we have between Italy and the United States are undeniably strong and stronger than they've ever been. Your first months as Consul General have included the US election campaign, of course, and I'm just wondering, how does being a US diplomat during an election year face different challenges than it might do in other more normal years?
So during my career, I've had the opportunity to be overseas for two significant presidential elections and transitions. So in 2008, I was in India for the elections and witnessed from overseas the transition from President Bush to President Obama. And then in 2016, I was in Jordan and experienced the transition from President Obama to President Trump. And you know, the really exciting part about being overseas for an election, U.S. election, is it's an opportunity for us to explain democracy, in particular our form of democracy, to talk about democratic values and our democratic system, warts and all. And this is particularly interesting and satisfying when we're serving overseas in a country that has a different system of governance. For example, in Jordan, you know, the system is the government is run by the king of Jordan, and so. And there, you know, I've served in other places that are also more nascent. And so it's an exciting time to be able to highlight and showcase democratic values and democratic pride. One thing we do as diplomats, or don't do, is we never proclaim that our system is the best or perfect. But we do proudly highlight that our system is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that through our democratic process, our citizenry is able to express itself and elect a government of its choosing. And so it's an exciting opportunity. In terms of being overseas for a transition, we usually don't see radical or significant changes from one presidential administration to the other when it comes to foreign policy. There are some shifts. For example, in President Obama, for example, joined the Paris Accords, and President Trump withdrew from them. But as a U.S. diplomat, as a civil servant, our job is to serve the current administration to the very best of our ability, and then prepare for to serve the next administration when the transition of power takes place.
I would say at this point, if any of our viewers around the world do have any questions for the US Consul General in Florence, if you'd just like to write them up on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll pick the best ones to ask away. We met briefly a couple of times, and we worked together with the Florentine to encourage overseas US citizens to vote during the elections. So this struck me as one of the services that the US consulate offers. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the priorities of the US consulate are in Florence and what your own goals are as the Consul General.
So, to be frank, the current COVID situation is playing a role and playing a part in dictating what our current goals and priorities are. And my hope is that as soon as we see the light at the end of the COVID tunnel, and the pandemic starts casting less of a pall over our daily lives and our operations, we'll be able to adjust and readjust our goals and priorities. But at this moment, we pretty much have four main priorities. The first is we're safeguarding the security, the health, and the safety of the employees here at the consulate. And what that means is that obviously, like many other workplaces, we've had to shift to smart working. We've minimized the number of people that we have working here on the compound significantly. We're operating on shifts. employees of the consulate and their families. Notwithstanding that, however, another critical priority of ours is also the well-being of the American community here in our consular district. There are over 60,000 Americans who are resident in our consular district. And notwithstanding the fact that we have less of a footprint here in the consulate, we are still providing the full suite of services to this American community. Now, what does that mean? That means that we are processing passport applications, that we're doing notarials, that if an American citizen needs to be repatriated under difficult circumstances, that we provide that assistance. If there's an unfortunate death of an American citizen here in Italy, in our consular district, we provide the assistance that we've always provided. We found ways to do it so that we're not doing it in person always, but we're still continuing to provide the full extent of the services to the American community here that we've always provided, and we're unfortunately, we don't have the 2 million tourists, American tourists, that are usually here in any given year, coming and going in any given year. The 8,000 to 12,000 American students that come to study and learn and imbibe from this incredible environment. So obviously, we have less of a demand for some of our emergency services, for example. But although we're doing less because the presence of Americans is less, we're still able to support the community. Another critical goal and priority is our focus on the bilateral economic relationship, particularly given the really devastating impact of this pandemic on the entire global economy, and the extent of which is still, yet to be ascertained. So we are typically, we focus on promoting investing in the United States by Italian companies. And even during these really challenging times, there have been significant investments announced by Italian companies in the US. We've had Menarini, the pharmaceutical company, and Sofidel announce major investments over the summer in the United States. But we're also seeing American companies continuing to invest in Italy. Just last week, UPS opened a major processing facility in Prato. And Baker Hughes, for example, has just this past summer launched a new phase, a major new phase in their operations here. Eli Lilly's expanding. So the strength of the U.S. and Italian economic partnership remains strong, and that's incredibly gratifying. And one of the ways that we here in the consulate are trying to support that, even though travel is by and large blocked, it's limited. There are certain categories of exceptions that we're able to process here in the consulate, and so for travelers whose travel would contribute a significant amount to the U.S. economy, we're able to process exceptions to the ban on travel. And then I'll just mention the last priority here of the consulate is, we're really, all of us are experiencing this incredibly palpable and tangible loss of the American presence here in the district, the tourists, the students. And so we're trying to find ways to facilitate the return of this incredible American presence. And so, for example, what that looks like is we're working with the American university programs to figure out what some of the obstacles are to their bringing American students back next spring or next summer. And then we're trying to use our good offices to help resolve or address some of the challenges that they've identified. So, in a nutshell, most of that is, as I mentioned, is sort of COVID related or has a COVID angle. But we're the bottom line is that we are trying to do everything that we can to support the very strong bilateral relationship that the U.S. and Italy have.
No, I mean, you've covered a lot of ground there in terms of, in terms of the community. I mean, of course, many families, many international families, American citizens have been affected by the loss of tourism, the loss in the study abroad industry. You mentioned the services that you provide, but I was wondering, does the consulate provide direct assistance to families who've been impacted because their livelihoods have been affected at all? Is that something that the consulate works towards in any way?
So in the ways that I've mentioned, we do support the return of the American students, for example, which has then an impact on the livelihoods. And I'll start off with some good news. I can report that a lot of the university programs are considering reopening for the spring. Many did not open. The vast majority did not open their doors here in the fall. But they're considering reopening in the spring or in the summer. And student visas are being issued. Both we here in the consulate are issuing student visas for Italians to travel to the United States. But the Italian embassy in the U.S. and Italian consulates in the U.S. are issuing student visas for Americans who want to come and study here. And one of the things that we did was we contacted the Italian embassy and obtained their guidelines, particularly with respect to student visas, and then pass that information on here to the American university program so that then they could inform their students and so that their students were advised and informed. One of the other ways in which we supported the American community over the past several months was in assisting Americans resident here to exercise that most fundamental right to vote. We used all the means at our disposal, including the Florentine, to get the word out about how Americans could submit their absentee ballots, and then we served as a receiving point, a receptacle for completed ballots, and then used our diplomatic pouch to send those ballots to the United States, so that the voice of the American community here in this region, their voice could be heard in the United States. Another thing that we're trying to do to prepare for the return of the American students, hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later, is we're working with the local authorities and a number of local partners to create a social sort of a safety net for Americans who may run into trouble after a night out on the town, for example. And so in these ways, we're trying to work systemically to facilitate the return of the students and the return of as many Americans as possible. I recall, especially over the summer when I had first arrived, and I was eating at restaurants on more than one occasion, eating outside, and I would be speaking, in my American accent, and I'd have a waiter or proprietor of a restaurant hear me and say, "Oh, are the Americans back? Are they allowed to come back?" And I had to, at that point, be the bearer of the bad news and the sad news that no, I'm just one person, and my situation and my case is unique. But I cannot wait for the day that we're able to return to the normalcy and have this incredible presence back amongst us here in Tuscany.
No, I mean, it's true. I remember walking along the Lungomare, Viareggio, and hearing one lone American voice, and my heart sort of leaped for a second. I was like, oh, but we know there are exceptions, but we know that you will be back. I say this to our American viewers, we know that you will be back as soon as you can be. We're having so many messages, as I'm sure you are at the US consulate, of support and desire, an absolute hunger for Italy. So we know that you'll be back very soon, as soon as you can be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I always find it very interesting speaking with diplomats, and your careers are quite fascinating, how they take you all over the world and how you meet so many different individuals. I'm wondering, in your position, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking, at you here today and thinking, I'd quite fancy being a diplomat. Would you recommend it?
I would recommend it 100%. It is an incredible career to have. You are able to serve your country while at the same time living a life of adventure. And I know that may sound sort of fanciful, but it truly isn't an exaggeration. Um, you know, it's the opportunity to learn different languages. I had 6 months of Italian language training before coming here to Italy. I've learned Arabic, I've learned Urdu, I've learned Spanish, all during the course of my diplomatic career and before my assignments. And at the same time, as I mentioned before, I've had the opportunity to witness history in the making. And to be a part of it, to be a part of that history, to play my small part. And so it's an incredibly fulfilling career. But I do have one caveat. It is a career that does require some measure of sacrifice. So, for example, every couple of years, you have to leave the community that you've ensconced yourself in, the friends that you've made, the sort of the comfort level that you've achieved, and start all over. Learn a new language, learn about a new culture, learn about a new society, and adjust and adapt all over again. And the personal adjustment isn't usually the most challenging part. What's really challenging, but also incredibly interesting and stimulating, is that you have to figure out how to achieve U.S. objectives in a completely different cultural and social environment. So what worked for me in Mexico, discussing the water treaties over a few shots of tequila, did not work in Pakistan. And what worked in Jordan doesn't work here. And so, finding the way to be effective and efficient, it can be a challenge. It's not just a challenge for the individual diplomat. The sacrifice is also requested and has to be made on the part of the family of each diplomat. And, I've been on this incredible adventure with my 2 children. And when I was in Jordan, then Vice President Biden came to visit, mostly to check up on the status of the operations with respect to the war against ISIS. But he also came to the embassy and he asked to have a meeting with the children of the diplomats. Wow. And he thanked them for their service and for their sacrifice. And his words were incredibly meaningful to me and my family then, and remain so to this day, because the children and the families of diplomats don't choose this life. They're just born into it. And they have to deal with the separation from family and the loss of a certain amount of stability and security in their lives. And so while it is a career, I can't imagine doing anything else. And I'm happy to speak in more detail and have, targeted sessions with groups or individuals who want to talk about how to become a U.S. diplomat and why it's such a fascinating career. But do keep that aspect in mind. There is that element of service and sacrifice.
Which leads us very nicely onto Thanksgiving, which is coming up very soon. So thank you to the children. Thank you to you for your sacrifice and your family, for being here and serving your country the way that you do. What is planned? Does the U.S. consulate in Florence have plans for Thanksgiving? And maybe you'd like to leave a Thanksgiving message for our viewers as well.
So unfortunately, this year is unprecedented in so many ways. And one of the ways that it's different, this year's different from prior years, is that we're not going to be having any significant Thanksgiving celebrations. We're not going to be throwing open our doors and sharing this incredible tradition that we have and that I've shared every Thanksgiving I've been overseas. I've shared with friends and contacts and the local staff where I've served. So that will not be happening. What we did do this past week, in order to thank our team here at the consulate, we had a socially distanced and safe Thanksgiving celebration to thank everyone here for the hard work that they've done throughout this crisis. And so we did it with 2 or 3 people coming at a time, getting their food, and then going back down to their desks to eat it over the course of 2 days, so that everybody got a chance to come up and have their Thanksgiving meal. So we adapted and we found a way. I think that, me and my family are going to, just the 4 of us, going to have a quiet Thanksgiving meal, the most quiet Thanksgiving meal that we've ever had. We're gonna do some things on our social media to highlight the event and the activities that we're doing inside and in a more private and personal way. And I think that, just in terms of a Thanksgiving message, I think it's hard right now to easily come up with the things that we are and should be thankful for at this time. We've experienced a lot of loss recently, and particularly here in Tuscany, going from yellow to orange to red in the span of just 6 or 7
weeks. Yeah.
But I think that that's the challenge this year, is to find and focus on the things that we are and should be thankful for. And as usual, those things are friends and family, and the ties that bind us. So that's the message that I'm going to be giving my own family, and I hope that it's of use to the viewers today as well.
Thank you very much. Stay tuned, stay connected with the US Consulate in Florence. They are very active on their social media channels. So there you can see the Facebook and Twitter communications. Ragini Gupta, thank you very much, US Consul General in Florence, and I hope we'll stay in touch and stay connected in the near future. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Goodbye.
Take care.